People love to go, well, we did our vision, missions, values, and we've put it all up on the wall and it looks fantastic. But then when it comes to actually making the decision about whether a realtor is the right fit for the brokerage, for the culture of the brokerage, for the realtors who have been with you and have helped to build that culture, it's not about putting butts in seats. If you do not work on office culture, you're behind the 8 ball. You're so far behind.
Welcome to the Real Estate Coffee House. Today's feature is Bold Culture with Lisa Craik. Michael and Lisa have a spot saved for you at their table. Enjoy the chat. Welcome to the Real Estate Coffee House podcast. I am Michael Thorne of RE/MAX Lifestyles Realty and the Thorne Macy Bongers Real Estate Group in Langley, BC. And my guest today is the Director of Operations, Marketing, and Realtor Relations at RE/MAX Lifestyles Realty in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia. She curates and cultivates culture in the office across the hall from mine. She is Lisa Craik. Hey, Lisa, thanks for joining us for the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting.
Now, you and I have had a lot of conversations about this topic just in the hallway.
We sure have.
So I think that there's a good chance that this won't fall within that traditional 30-minute limit of our podcast, because I think it's a really important topic to dig into.
Yeah.
And Lisa and I are going to pour over the importance of office culture. But first, the news.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Each week, we take a few minutes with our guests to dig into a real estate news story. This is an article, and I'll link it in the description down below, from Inman News. It's an opinion article that says, stand out the 7 PR strategies every real estate agent needs. And before we discuss it, you've got like 25 years in marketing, public relations. So just quickly give us a little bit about your background before we dig into the article.
Of course. So I actually started in marketing back in my early 20s, and it sort of fell into it unnaturally. And all of a sudden, it became this thing that I really, really enjoyed. And as my career progressed, I then moved from the retail world into media and landed up being there for, well, around 22 years, and worked my way from doing sales up to sales supervisor, then to manager, then to publisher, and then got to have a team and actually really be involved in all aspects of media, which of course included everything to do with operations, change management, because media has been changing so dramatically in the last 10 to 12 years. Mm-hmm. So my background really was taking my marketing experience and then sort of cultivating that into other areas. And as I grew in my career over a 23 year period, and then got really ready to come to real estate, never realizing that real estate is actually where I would land.
Yeah. So on that note, I think as individual agents, and of course, I think when we talk about the bigger brands or the corporates, there's a much more emphasis when it comes to PR. But I think as realtors, individual realtors, we don't really think about PR. And there's a quote in here that says, for PR to be effective, it can't be scattershot. It needs to be a cohesive dovetail with marketing and advertising efforts. Our team thinks about marketing. I think we think about advertising, but we don't think about PR. How is PR different than marketing and advertising? And where do you think a couple of the opportunities might be for PR for real estate agents?
Right. So PR is the one aspect that most people are probably really uncomfortable with, because it's got to do with the language that you're using and how you're structuring that out into the market. So when we talk about branding, most people get what a brand is versus advertising, right? So brand is you're setting yourself up so that people know who you are, what your values are, what you stand for, and you're making that very clear, concise move every time you put something out into the market. And then when you're advertising, well, you're looking for some immediate response from someone. And I always say, when you're advertising, if you're not getting a response from people, there's something wrong. There should always be a knee-jerk response to what it is that you're asking people to do. Otherwise, you're putting out the wrong message. But public relations is something completely separate to that. And yet it's so important to have it lining up with your messaging. So you always have to make sure that when you're putting out what your brand is, or you're putting out your marketing and your advertising, your PR is lining up to that. So the same kind of wording, structure, making sure that you're managing the message about who you are and what you're putting out into the market. And especially in today's digital age, there's just no such thing as putting something out digitally and then pulling it back. So before you put something out there, maybe check it. Have it land with a couple of people and see how that wording's going to land, especially if you're blogging. That's where PR is really sitting, because you're using the written word. And you've got to be able to make sure that the way in which you're communicating with people, they're actually going to understand what you're trying to tell them, and you're not going to miss the mark.
So from your history in media, when the media knows who you're a credible source of information, they're much more likely to reach out to you.
Correct.
And it seems like when it comes from a third party perspective, whether it's podcasts or television or newspapers, we keep seeing the same faces over and over again, the same people going for quotes, because I think they're quick with the response.
Right.
They phrase it the right way. They give them the soundbite that they want.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity for agents in different marketplaces, especially with the changing market, to sort of be that voice that local media turns to for that soundbite?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing with local community media, which is different to the national, international news landscape, is that you can actually communicate with your local media in a way that you can't with other media sources. Any local media that you'll be talking to, they've all got digital. So you know that, they're going to be putting that out pretty quickly. So if you see something happening in the market, for instance, in the emerging market that's happening right now, you have the opportunity to become a source for the media. Well, how does that happen? Well, that happens with you reaching out to those journalists and giving them press releases. There's your PR. So you've got to make sure that there's always a hook. Okay, the media is always going to be looking for, what are you trying to say that is different than the 500 other people there that are sending them the same piece of information? So when you're able to give them a unique story or a unique piece of information that they can share with their readers or their followers or whoever it is that they're engaging with, that's your opportunity. Send a lot. You never know when they're going to pick it up. Once you start to build relationship with those journalists, you now have opportunity that when they're writing a story, they're going to go, gee, you know what? Michael Thorne spoke to me about XYZ, and he really knew what he was talking about. So I'm doing this other article. I'm actually going to call him for a quote. That's your opportunity.
The pouring of a fresh cup means we're moving on to the main topic of today's chat with Lisa Craik. And speaking of culture, Lisa, which we're going to be talking about, this is our first in-person conversation for the new podcast. And we're doing it in the media room, the podcast and video room here at RE/MAX Lifestyles. Now, I don't mean to spoil it for you, but at the end of the podcast, we have a quick fire round of 7 questions.
Okay.
And the first question of season 1 is, if you were to move to a new area, what would be the main thing you'd be looking for in a new brokerage?
Right.
And I just want to have you listen to the responses we've had so far. You've moved to a new area. What is the number one thing you'd be looking for in a brokerage?
I would say a sense of culture, a sense of camaraderie, a sense of people working together as a collective.
Values. Do I resonate with them? Do I resonate with the values that this company is in terms of the owners, all the way down to the staff?
Relevancy, culture, and consistency.
Does the brokerage align with kind of the energy that I have and the core values that I have?
Somebody who leads a culture and who leads an environment of growth and support.
Our guests this season over and over reference the same 2 words, values and culture. That's why I wanted to do this episode, is when you hear so many people saying something over and over again, and really successful people, you know that there is an importance there to it. I thought about doing a bit of a disclaimer at the top of the episode to brokerages, because I fear that when a lot of people hear this conversation, they go, oh no, I'm in the wrong spot. And I was thinking about, not intended to negate a previous relationship and whatnot. But then I started thinking about it. Great brokers out there aren't worried about us having this conversation. Only bad brokers are worried about their agents knowing what culture and the importance of culture is. So I said, well, forget it. We don't need a disclosure. If you realize because you hear this conversation that you're in the wrong spot, I think that's important. And I hope the agents win and they make decisions to improve their business and their daily lives. But I really want to just first talk about my experience, because I think a lot of agents will find it relatable. When I got my real estate license, not even when I got my license, when I wrote my test, as I was leaving the hall of the exam room, there was people outside handing out flyers, almost like walking down the strip of Vegas, handing out flyers saying, come work for us, come work for us, come work for us. And then when I decided to start interviewing brokers, that's the advice that I got. You're interviewing them, they're not interviewing you. And so the mindset was, what can you do for me? Opposed to me asking, what can I be a part of?
Right.
That was never part of the conversation. And so fast forward, I'm now been in business for 12, 13 years at the brokerage I first decided to work with. And I was at a conference about ethics. It was all these little mastermind round tables. And I was sitting at a table about 7 or 8 different people. And we were going to spend the next 3 days with the same 7 or 8 people. And over lunch, I was talking to this broker owner from Vancouver Island. And I said, how many agents do you have in your office? And he said, always 25. And it was a very unique response when someone said, always 25. I said, well, what do you mean by that? He says, I only have 25 agents. And when we have someone retire or have someone move or we let someone go, we look at all the people that want to work for us and we pick the best one. And that's the person that fills that seat and we stay at 25.
Right.
And it was like the very first time I'd even thought about culture. And I said to him, well, why wouldn't you want to have 50 people in your seats? He says, because we're not productive that way. It's going to kill the environment. That's why people want to come here, because we have something different. And this was mid-2000s. I had never, ever thought about office culture ever before that. Right. And now I think about it constantly. It's the reason why I'm here at RE/MAX Lifestyles. So if a company's culture is hard to define, it I think simply is. My experience is when you have it, you know that it's there. But culture is sort of a big mix of work environment, company mission, value, ethics, expectations, goals. So I've said to you, office culture is hard to define. Yep. So here we go. Define office culture.
It is hard to define. And I think the biggest part of office culture is that most leaders, whether they're a broker or an owner or a managing broker, it doesn't matter. It has to be foremost in your mind every single day. Every day you show up in that brokerage, you have to know what the culture is that you're trying to build in the brokerage. And it starts with a foundation, like anything. I think what a lot of people try to do is they try to miss the steps and get quickly to the culture, but they don't realize what you actually have to do to get to culture. So you mentioned clearly where you said, company mission, value, ethics, expectations, vision. So for us, our vision is to lead, elevate, and inspire our realtors, our staff, and the real estate industry. It took us 3 months of work to get to that vision. That is who we are. And we started with our vision, and then we moved to our mission, and then we moved to our values. And if you don't know what your vision, mission, values are as a brokerage, taking into consideration what your ownership, your managing brokers, your staff are all looking for, what your realtors are looking for, and you don't spend the time to build that properly and to create your foundation, you cannot build the building blocks on top of that to build your culture. So culture for me always starts with vision, mission, value. Once you've got that set, you start to perforate all of that into everything that you do. And then you build your culture. Culture comes from knowing who you are. And you mentioned right at the beginning, a part where when you got into the real estate industry, you went to interview brokerages. I think one of the biggest mistakes brokerages make is they are not interviewing back.
Yes.
So one of the things that is different for us is our interviewing process. They are interviewing us, and rightly so. However, we are just as much interviewing you, because culture is absolutely imperative to the success of the brokerage and to all of our realtors and their teams. Without it, you don't have loyalty, you don't have trust, you don't have transparency. There's all these different things that don't come when you're not working on culture. And the biggest thing is that in today's day and age, maybe 20 or 30 or 50 years ago, culture was a bit of a buzzword, and some businesses had it, some corporations had it. When Google got really big, all of a sudden everyone started talking about culture because that was the buzzword with Google. But for us, it is now a staple. If you do not work on office culture, you're behind the 8 ball. You're so far behind, because as you heard from the people that you interviewed, it's a number one.
Absolutely. So in talking about the missions and values, if it's very important for you to have a mission statement and you needed to have it on your website, going to someone else's webpage and cutting and pasting their mission statement doesn't mean you have a mission statement.
It does not.
They're just not words.
Yes.
And so I think that's really, really important. It's not a slogan. It's not a catchphrase. They're actual values that you want to live every day, because if they're just words, then it doesn't have an impact on your business.
Absolutely. You are literally exhibiting that from a leadership perspective every single day. So for instance, one of our values is transparency. Well, that has to be at all levels of the business. And if you're not exhibiting that, your agents are going to pick that up in about 3 seconds flat. So people love to go, well, we did our vision, missions, values, and we've put it all up on the wall and it looks fantastic. But then when it comes to actually making the decision about whether a realtor is the right fit for the brokerage, for the culture of the brokerage, for the realtors who have been with you and have helped to build that culture, it's not about putting butts in seats. But for some brokerages, it is. And, that's their business model, and that's okay. But be upfront about it. Don't try and say that it's not that, if that's actually what you're doing. So for us, we do slow build because we want it to be the right fit. You can kill culture in about 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks, actually, from what I've researched. It doesn't take much if you get the wrong person in the wrong place to start to pull apart your culture. So you have to be focused on it every single day. And sometimes it's hard because you got to get things done operationally. You just got to get stuff done. You start to feel yourself being pulled and you go, no, what is our vision? If we're not leading in our minds, in our brokerage, if we're not leading, elevating, or inspiring, then we're not doing it, period.
Yeah. So what I find very interesting about office culture in a real estate setting versus a normal business is a normal business has the leadership and all the employees with the same vision.
Yes.
But what makes real estate interesting is RE/MAX Lifestyles as a brokerage has a why. And then you've got all these agents underneath you, all with their own individual whys.
Correct.
Is it important that all the realtors have some sort of connecting through line or has something that connects them in order to have what the brokerage has as their why and their culture to then come through down to all the individual agents that have their own individual businesses?
100%. So one of the most important things is that we recognize that we are a business filled with independent contractors. They have their own business, so they have their own business within our business. And we need to recognize and respect that. So we set the tone for who the brokerage is, because that's the environment that they're going to want to do business within and build their own unique vision, mission, values, right? And we need to align on value, because if, let's say, one of my values is honesty and I have someone who doesn't find that as a value, well, we're going to immediately have a conflict in the brokerage. So first off, it comes down to bringing in the right realtors, the right independent contractors into the brokerage that align with the values that are important to us and are actually important to that realtor. It's not just about what's important to the brokerage. It's about what the realtors are feeding back to us. That's where those values came back, is because it's important to them. So in regards to your question, you have an office filled with independent contractors. They're all unique individuals, have their own personalities. You've got to give them the freedom to be able to be who they are, but yet within the structure of the brokerage that they feel supported. One thing I've learned is that people like to know where the boundaries are. They want to know where you stand. When they know where you stand, then they can relax. They can lean into it. They can lean into the brokerage for the support that they need. But if you're like wishy-washy on what you're doing, then they're going to be wishy-washy in their business. So from a leadership role, it's absolutely imperative that you are leading by example. You're showing those independent contractors how you work every day, that you do power hours, that you do meetings, that you are engaging, you're creating relationship, you're showing integrity, trust, honesty, collaboration, teamwork. If you're doing all those things, then you start to influence the way that they're doing it, and they're going to do it back to you.
Yeah.
So it's a reciprocal relationship.
And that's really the next question is, then what's the role of the realtor in protecting and cultivating and fostering culture. If it comes top down, it also has to come back from the agent. So
100%.
what is the agent's role in office culture?
For me, it comes down to a couple of words: engagement, collaboration, and passion for what they do. I mean, if you have an agent who's not loving being in real estate, it's going to start to filter out.
Yeah.
So we are very fortunate that the people we have chosen to surround ourselves with are very passionate about real estate. They love showing up every day, and they love helping people find homes and businesses. That is their passion in life. I have found in my experience, and certainly from those that have been in this industry for much longer than I have, when you have agents that are not engaged in activities, things that are happening within the office, meetings, events, meeting with other realtors, working with them in a collaborative atmosphere, it's hard for them to actually stay in this industry. They start to sort of fall away because real estate is quite a lonely business for the realtor themselves. Where they get their engagement and their energy and support is from the brokerage and from other agents, their colleagues in the industry. So if they're not engaging, it's really hard for the brokerage to build that energy momentum if the agents aren't engaging back. But I'm a big believer that it always starts with leadership. Always. So if you're exhibiting that energy level, that passion yourself, they start to reflect back at you. If you're noticing that agents aren't doing that, then you have to look at yourself and say, hey, am I engaging with them in the right way? Is this how they like to communicate with me, or am I missing something? So as a leader, you have to actively listen all the time and not listen to how to reply to the question that's coming at you, but actually listen.
You've talked about interviewing agents and the fact that they're interviewing you and you're interviewing them. Where have you found the intangible of culture on the list of wants and needs from agents that you're speaking to? And does that differ the younger the agent is?
Yes. I mean, I think every demographic specifically has different ways in which they engage. Right? I'm specifically Gen X. I guess if you were to put me in a box, I'm a Gen Xer. But, you know, we have boomers in the office. We have millennials. We have Gen Z. And all of them have unique ways that they like to do business. What we want to find is the balance that they can all collaborate with one another and learn from one another, because a millennial might come in with some really unique digital experience that perhaps a Gen Xer doesn't have in the field. How do we get that information flow happening where everybody feels respected regardless of age? So as far as I'm concerned, I don't specifically look at age. I look at skill set and I look at energy. The biggest part for us is we can train on anything. When it comes to real estate, we got all the tools. We've got the training program, which is a huge part for culture. Training programs are a must in the brokerage. And if you don't have proper training, you're missing the mark. But in regards to all the different demographics out there, how do we find ways to collaborate? Well, we create environments that we put people together and we create conversation. When all that's happening, we start to realize there's a lot of similarities, no matter what your age is. We're all going after the same goal.
Yeah.
You hear the younger realtors listening to the more experienced realtors, and the more experienced realtors going, wow, I didn't know you could do that. Okay, well, show me how you do that. And then it starts to become a giving relationship on both sides of the equation. Yep. We don't want to foster any kind of cultural environment where one group of agents feels that they are potentially more superior to another group. Everybody can learn from everybody. And that includes the brokerage, management. We sit and we have those kind of feedback focus groups. Tell us what you're thinking. Tell us what you're feeling. What's happening out there? We want to hear from them. We don't want to assume we know what an agent is experiencing out in the field.
I think every office has culture. Could be good culture, bad culture.
Absolutely.
It will foster itself. In some way it will manifest.
Yes.
So how does an agent listening to this podcast go, am I in a place that doesn't have healthy culture? Is there some warning signs or some things that when people come in, they relate, look at, I just left a brokerage that had ABC and I'm not looking to replace that. I'm looking for XYZ. Right. How does an agent know they're in the wrong spot?
Well, I think that you have to always listen to your inner intuition. And I'm a big believer in that. I think that it starts in a person when they're not in the right place, very subtly. It starts with things like you wake up in the morning and you're just not necessarily really invested in getting up and getting into the office or going to an office meeting, or you're finding yourself starting to disengage with your colleagues or disengage with management or ownership. You're not as apt to want to participate in a positive manner. And I think when that's starting to happen, you have to kind of listen to what your body's telling you. And it usually is people start disengaging, right? So that's where the engagement piece is. And if I start seeing someone's disengaging, reaching out to them. And if no one's reaching out to you and you're in a brokerage and no one's reaching out to you, you've got nowhere to ask for help. You're not finding that you're getting the support that you need. Sit down and write all the things that are important to you. Culture might be number one or number two, or it might be part of your top 10. But what are the key pieces? Write it down, and then write down what you're seeing happening in the brokerage. Because when you start seeing it in the written word, it starts to mean something different. And I think that if you can't identify what the brokerage is giving you in regards to what you need, then you may potentially be in the wrong place. And fear is that one thing that holds a lot of agents back from making a change, because they're like, well, it's what I know.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to stick it out here, even though it's toxic, even though I walk into the office and not one other realtor will greet me. I mean, I've interviewed agents where they've said, I walk in the office and no one even says hi. It's as if I do not exist. For us, that's an unacceptable place to be in our brokerage. There is training that comes with our staff about how to greet our agents.
Yeah.
We want them to feel special every time they walk in the office, to be acknowledged, to know that they are important to us. So listen to your body. You know deep down if you are unhappy where you are.
Absolutely. And I think that's where I started off. When you're in a really good environment, you can't really put your finger on it. You just know you're in the right place. I think same thing goes. When you're in the bad environment, you just know you're in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about office culture, and this is from an agent that's been doing it for almost 30 years. And the last 2 brokerage moves our team made was in pursuit of culture, but it was something we weren't aware of for the first 15 years.
Right.
In general, office culture doesn't cost anything. It's not a desk fee. You don't pay for it, right?
No.
And I think without a doubt, it makes you a more productive agent because you're in an environment where people are sharing and learning. You have more energy. I think it keeps you much more motivated. So I think financially, it's really, really valuable to play in a place of culture.
Agreed.
And then even probably more important on that is your happiness as an individual agent. We are, I don't know what the saying is exactly, but you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right?
Yes,
and so if you look in a work environment, I spend a ton of time with Jordan and Trish, but then there's 2 other spots in that top 5. There are people like yourself or Ayla at the front desk. But then if the 5 people have the most impact on who you are, then numbers 5 through 15 also must have an impact, maybe at not the same scale, but they impact your happiness and who you are and your success. So I think the only reason why an agent shouldn't be at an office that has great office culture is because you're one of those agents that aren't allowed to be in an office that has great office culture because you're the agent that will kill it. I think that's the only reason why you shouldn't be at a great office.
Right. I mean, I've read so many articles and researched and everybody who talks about culture in a real estate brokerage and how to foster the best culture, they talk about pulling the weeds.
Yeah.
And it sounds quite dramatic,
Yeah.
but it is. And it hurts. It hurts because for a lot of people, perhaps they've been there for a long time. Hurts on the brokerage side because you're actually letting those agents go and you might have empty space in your office for a while. It's not an easy thing to do, but if you're going to stand up for the integrity of your office space, if you're going to stand up for the integrity of your staff and your realtors, and you want to foster an environment where they can have the best business as an independent contractor that they can build, if you're not working on culture in your office, it's actually a really scary place for where is that brokerage going to be 2, 5, 10 years? Are they even going to make 5, 10 or years down the road?
Yeah.
Culture is, as you said, an intangible. You can't touch it. You can't feel it, but you can create it. And I know that during the pandemic, this was not an easy place to create culture because everybody was pushed to doing everything either online. We were not allowed to be in the same room. There were restrictions. And I was trying to build culture in a time when you cannot do face-to-face. So how do you do that? How do you actually build culture both digitally and in person? It is possible. The only thing is that digital just takes you much longer.
And I think traditionally, when I talk about younger people coming into the business, I think younger people generally are much more collaborative. I think the education system has changed a lot where they're sitting at desks together and they're doing team projects where I was, in rows, an individual.
Right.
Office environment used to be very competitive. And then we sort of became colleagues. Yes. And now we're collaborators. And I think when someone comes into our office and asks a question and someone sits down and opens up their playbook, metaphorical playbook, and answers their questions, sometimes the eyes open up like, oh, this is different.
Yeah.
But that's the thing you said before, that everyone can learn from everyone else. And I've got 5 or 6 really great tactics, and I share my 5 with someone else and they share their 5. Now I've got 10 and they've got 10.
Yes.
And that feeds on it, and it just grows and grows and grows.
Yeah.
And it's that saying that my good friend Jesse Peters says all the time, that a rising tide raises all boats. And that's really what office culture can come down to. You were talking about the importance of ongoing education. Is it important that a brokerage offer ongoing education opportunities beyond just the licensing requirements? And does culture that includes learning environments help agents become more confident and grow their business?
When someone comes straight out of UBC, out of school, getting their license, they've learned the legal aspects of being a realtor. What they haven't done is any of the actual day-to-day work that is associated with buying and selling property. It is incumbent upon the brokerage to provide that. And if you're not being provided that, I would say that's a huge red flag. So there's all different kinds of training. And as a brokerage, we look at how do we create training programs based on where someone is in their life cycle in their career. For the brand new agent that's coming right out of school and is looking to join our brokerage, we have an onboarding program, for instance, that is specific to them. It is a 6-month intensive, get you ready to know how to be a realtor in the market. And a realtor that is going to reflect RE/MAX core values as well as RE/MAX lifestyles and be professional in the industry. But then you have agents that are already agents. They've been agents for years. And how do you help them to elevate their business to the next level? Because everybody has different ideas of success, and we work really, really hard not to identify that only production levels are a level of success. That's one aspect of success, but it's not necessarily the be all or end all. We have amazing realtors that know exactly how many deals they need to do in a year, and that work-life balance for them is extremely important. And that for them is a level of success that they can go to Little Johnny's play and have the freedom to do that in their career. And then you have teams. What is the training with teams? What is the mentorship program? So we are constantly evolving and adapting and looking at 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 3 years from now, what do we want this training to look like? And it's constantly changing. So you can't just build a training program and then go, whoa, I can take a break now because I got that training out of the way. I mean, you have the foundation of it, but you're constantly adapting and changing because the market never stays the same. And if you're keeping your training exactly the same for the last 20 years, you've missed the mark again. I have a set of questions when I'm interviewing an agent that gets me very quickly to find out where they're at and what they're looking for. Training, if you're talking culture, training will be the next big one that they want to talk about. They want to know what kind of support they're going to get, what kind of training. And even people who don't think they need training, we always want to provide opportunities for them to continue their learning, whether it's on digital, webinars, Zoom calls, in person, mastermind, whatever that looks like for them. How do they want to engage? So we try to provide it on all different platforms so that the way that their personality wants to engage with the brokerage gives them that opportunity. There's no cookie cutter realtor. Everybody is a unique, and we want to treat them as such.
Now it's time for Been There, Done That.
Tell him he gives me a cup of coffee, I'll answer his questions.
Now we're on to the rapid fire round of 7 questions focused on our guest's real estate experience. Now you might have to put on your realtor cap for a couple of these. Question number 1, you already know it, but let's sum it up one more time. You've moved to a new area. What will be the number one thing you'd be looking for in a brokerage?
So culture is for sure number 1. Even for myself in my career, anytime I've looked at a business or a corporate entity that I've wanted to join, I've looked at what is their culture. I want to be part of something special. I want to be part of something where I get to be me and I'm accepted as myself and I can contribute and be valued for my contributions.
Question number 2, what advice would you give an agent who's never experienced a dramatic market shift to help them get the most out of a changing market?
I think listen. I think that is really, really important right now. There are agents out there that have a lot of experience. They've gone through a multitude of ups and downs. There's experienced agents that went through 2008. Yep. Sit down and ask them questions. They are more than happy to share their experience. Work hard. I think that's a big one. Sometimes we can get a little tied up in all the digital technology out there. But when you really get down to it, real estate is a lead generation business. And if you are not spending time lead generating, you're going to really struggle in this market.
Question number 3, in your business today, what single activity or product gives you the best ROI of your time and or dollars?
I think first thing in the morning, it's setting out my calendar for the day, having a list of things to get done. And I always break it into 2. One is the must-haves, they have to get done. And then the would be nice to get completed, right? There is a program that I use, and it's a way to follow projects. Because I handle a lot of operations, specifically in my role in RE/MAX Lifestyles, I like to follow my projects and see how I'm reaching a state of completion. I think that could be something that could really help realtors when they have a lot of things happening all at once, some way that they can try and manage all the balls in the air.
Question number 4, what is the worst movie you legitimately enjoy?
The worst movie? Oh, there's a few of them. I don't know. I'm a rom-com girl. So, there's probably a bunch that I watch that a lot of people are like, I cannot believe you just watched that. And I really enjoy it. Let's say probably one of the worst movies, just because I don't think it's a really great movie, but I love it. It's called The Holiday.
Oh, the Christmas one with
Jack Black. It's just really, it's pretty corny, but you know what? I watch it every year.
Number 5, what is the best piece of business advice you've received?
Okay, this is a good one. I went and did some training about 6 years ago. It was management training, and we had a guy come in from Florida, and he was an ex-pro tennis player, had gone to Harvard, went all around the world teaching media companies how to elevate their management, how to elevate their sales teams. He went everywhere from the Middle East to North America, all over Europe and Africa. And he said, I want everybody in the room to raise their hand and tell me if you have a mentor. And maybe out of a room of about 50, maybe 5 people lifted their hand. And he said, that is a major issue in business today. Every person, any person, I don't care what your industry is, what you're doing, you should have a mentor. And the mentor should not be from your industry. They need to be from an industry that is not yours. Because the minute you get someone from your industry, there are blinders. You see things the same way. You're not going to necessarily see a resolution or a solution to a problem. You need someone who is from a different industry. And when you meet with them once a month and you share with them some of the struggles, they're going to see the path way easier because they're not all tied up in your head like someone else is in your industry. So not only should you always have a mentor, but you should be a mentor. And that is the giving back in the community that I think sometimes we're missing. You need to have someone mentoring you with their experience, with their knowledge, helping you to elevate your role in this world. But you need to be doing it for someone else coming up because you were that same person back then. What you get back from the person that you mentor is so much more than what you actually give. Yeah. So when you're doing those 2 things, if I was to give any business advice to anybody, go make sure you have a mentor and make sure that you're mentoring somebody.
Love it. Number 6, 30,000-foot view. What is something you wished you could change about the real estate industry?
I think the perception of the real estate industry. I think there's people out there that really don't understand the value proposition of a realtor. I think realtors struggle to get across to their clients the value that they bring in that particular deal. From a 30,000 foot view, if there was one thing I would want to do, and that's why we put it in our vision for our brokerage, we don't just work with our own realtors. We have touch points with all these other realtors from other brokerages, and we want to set the standard of what excellence is in this industry, because we want people to see the real estate industry as professional, as excellent. And I think that's something that we all need to work towards.
Question number 7. In one sentence, how would you sum up the internet?
10% of it is really great and awesome and amazing and has made some really incredible changes in this world. But about 90% of it is a waste of time. And I think too many of us, and I'm including myself in there, we sometimes go down that rabbit hole, and there's so many more productive activities that we could actually do to move our business forward, to spend time with our families, to be engaged with our friends, our community in a way that is not digital.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for being my guest and spilling the beans on the importance of office culture. And thank you, the listener, for joining Lisa and myself for a chat about bold culture here at the Real Estate Coffee House. We hope that it brewed up some value for you, and remember to enjoy the grind.
That's this week's episode of the Real Estate Coffee House podcast with your host, Michael Thorne. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode. The Real Estate Coffee House podcast is brought to you by Thorne Maisie Bonger's Real Estate Group with Remax Lifestyles Realty in Langley, BC. Thank you for listening.